And just like that, the excitement about the iPad mini and the iPhone 13 series seems to now have fallen to the wayside. And now we are looking ahead at another event. We've got pre-orders of the Apple Watch Series 7 open live right now. The Series 7 will launch next Friday. Matt, it is full steam ahead in the Apple world. Boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about today. But first, of course, as always, we want to hear from you guys. If you guys hear something during this episode that you want to comment on, you got a question, you got a comment, or you're looking to sort of give your perspective on things, whatever it may be, we want to hear from you. You can dial into the Apple Circle hotline. That number is 949-354-3508. You can give us a call, you can text us, and you can be included in the next episode of the Apple Circle podcast. We want to hear from you guys. Of course, we also are doing this as a video podcast as well. So if you just don't want to listen, we also want to experience the full immersive video experience as well. You can do that at the Apple Circle Podcast YouTube channel, link down below. We've also got clips on there as well. Enough housekeeping. Matt, how you doing this week? Are you looking forward to all the crazy stuff going on in the world of Apple? How you doing?
It's good. I mean, it's the fall, so that means we get not only Apple events, but for the first time for me really ever, I'm having a real winter. It's starting to get cold because I'm out of California now. It's supposed to snow next week, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, tons of Apple news, which, like you said, we got the Apple iPhone, the iPad out of the way, but there's still a lot more to cover. One thing I completely missed somehow, I don't know how I completely missed this. I didn't realize that Apple officially announced that pre-orders were going to begin on Friday on October 8th. I thought that was just like a rumor. I totally missed that. I got that totally wrong.
It was one of those stealth press releases.
Yeah, I don't know how that's totally skipped my brain, but that leads to the question, are you ordering one, and what are you going to get if you are?
See, this is a good question because we talked about this before on a previous episode, and I'm not going to go the whole debacle about the Series 7, whether this is what we were going to get from the beginning or not. This is what we're getting this year, so we just kind of have to live with that. And I think I'm going to upgrade. I have a Series 5 now, so my Apple Watch history has been sort of sporadic. I had the original one, like a Sport 42 millimeter. That was the one I had. Then I didn't get the Series 2 or the 3 or the 4. But then when the 4 came out, I borrowed a Series 2 from John Rettinger, kind of the head honcho of the JFL network, kind of who the name is after. He let me borrow a Series 2, and then I was able to use that for a while, which was nice. It was actually like kind of a big upgrade from my Series 1 or Series 0 because the processor was like twice as fast. It had a lot of capabilities that the other one didn't. Apps seemed to work a lot better. That was really nice. And then I waited and kind of bid my time until the Series 5 was released, and then I picked that up. So really, I've only ever bought 2 Apple Watches, the first one and the Series 5. I used the Series 2, and then now I'm kind of like in the middle here. I didn't really want to upgrade to the Series 6 just because it didn't make sense, and now with the Series 7, I'm contemplating whether or not I want to make the move. I think I'm going to do it for the larger display, but I don't think that I'm going to go with the stainless steel. I talked about it. I was like, oh, maybe this year I'm going to upgrade materials. But then I looked at the price again, and I'm like, do I really want to spend double the price for the nicer material? I don't know. I think that, at least in my mind, I'm justifying the fact that I want to wait until the proper redesign happens and then make the move for the better material. I think this year I'm going to do it just for the larger display, and I'll probably just stick with aluminum just because I can trade this one in. It'll cost like a couple $100, and that's kind of the end of the story for that. What about you? What are you going to do? Are you going to upgrade to the Series 7?
Yeah, I'm going to upgrade because similar to you, well, no, not really. I've had a lot of the Apple Watches, but the Apple Watch is one of the products I haven't upgraded year over year like I do a lot of other products. I guess the iPad, well, that's not true. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't upgrade my Macs or my iPads or my Apple Watches. Everything else I pretty much upgrade, though. So yeah, similar story. I had the first one, then I got the second watch, and then funny enough, I bought my 3rd gen Apple Watch, the Apple Watch Series 3 from John. I bought his, I don't know why he got rid of it. I don't know why he bought it either.
John has kindly supplied us with many cool Apple products.
Yeah, exactly. But then I upgraded to the Series 4, and that's what I'm currently on right now, and I'm ready for an upgrade. This watch is working pretty well. I've had some issues with like the side button, but I've been holding out for an update for a long time, and I know the design of this new watch is not what everyone was hoping it would be, but it is still new, and I am in need in some ways of a new watch. So I'm ready to go in. But I'm kind of contemplating too, am I going to get the stainless steel because I really want it, but they are expensive, man. They're expensive.
They are expensive. That's like where my hesitation was. Like I've only had the aluminum Apple Watch, and it's nice, but I definitely think that there is I don't want to get into I'm not an Apple marketing person here, but I definitely think there is a different experience with the stainless steel, and there's something about a higher quality material that's nice. The one thing for me, though, that I kind of used to sort of justify my decision to go with aluminum is I'm assuming that, I'm hoping that next year in 2022, there will be more features with the Series 8. Not even in terms of design, but in terms of health features and monitors and stuff like that. Because this Series 7 is so lacking in that department, I'm expecting to upgrade next year to the Series 8. And with that in mind, I can better justify the aluminum. And the aluminum is not bad by any means. It's not,
No, it's not bad.
It doesn't take away, it's not like the stainless steel or titanium or any higher end Apple Watch can do more than the other ones can do. But it's just really a matter of the kind of the finish of the Apple Watch. I also realized that I have no need for LTE connectivity, but if you go with stainless steel, you sort of have to pay that price to get it because they only have GPS and cellular connectivity sort of as the standard, where if you go with the lower end ones, you can save some money and go with just the GPS model. So I don't know. I was torn about it. I looked, and for me, I'm like, as much as I'd like to do it, if I'm going to upgrade next year and it's only going to be a year, I just don't want to pay double for basically the same watch. But that was me. If you get the stainless steel, please tell me how it is, because I'm sure it's wonderful. But I think I'm just going to go aluminum this year.
I'll probably end up getting the stainless steel. I don't know if that's the initial one I'm going to order, just because pre-orders get kind of crazy. You want to make sure you get in there and get what you can get. But I'll probably eventually end up with the stainless steel. I wanted them to bring back the ceramic. I definitely would have paid for that because that feels like different. But what was I going to say? I was going to say something. Oh, I've had the stainless steel. I think I had the stainless steel Series 2, and it is a different experience, I will say. I would say once you go stainless steel, you won't go back, but I obviously did because I now have an aluminum. But I'm ready to go back. It's just I don't know if I'm going to do it this year. Here's a question, though, about the Apple Watch. Mm-hmm. So they are, like I said, they are redesigning the watch this year, even though it's minor. Are they going to do the squared off design next year, or are they going to go through a 3-year cycle or something?
See, that's a great question. I have heard rumors that next year with the Series 8, that's the one with the new redesign, which makes sense on one hand because this year was such a minor redesign, all things considered. But if Apple really is true to their word and this is what they had planned all along and this is the quote-unquote major redesign, then why would they change the design a year later?
Exactly.
I don't know. It doesn't make sense in the history of the Apple Watch we have seen, though the Apple Watch is still such a new product that they could change things, and I'm all for them changing the design. I don't know. If I had to make a bet right now based off what we saw this year, I would expect that next year we get the same design, but Apple adds those additional health sensors, and then maybe the following year is when we get another redesign, because Apple seems to stick with the same design for 2 or 3 years. So I would expect no squared off edges, as much as it pains me to say that. Probably not till a year after next. What about you? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of think the same thing. I mean, like I said, I've said this like 6 times already, but they are redesigning it, which means they had to do the R&D into it. Even if the design changes are minor, that still involves retooling and still involves new castings. All that kind of stuff is still different, which costs money. And Apple needs to make their money back on that investment. So that's why they don't redesign the phone every year, is because it costs a lot of money to redesign a new phone, or phone and watch in this case. But so I can't see them just doing it next year. Maybe it's a TikTok type thing, and instead of getting 3 or 3, I guess, then we go back to 2. I don't know, but I'm not too hopeful that next year we're going to get a complete redesign. But that also leads to another question. If it sounds like you're thinking that's kind of the case too, then will you get the Series 8 even if it looks like the Series 7, or?
You know what? It depends, I guess, on what the sensors and what the new tech inside is. we don't have a good track record on the Apple Watch. I guess we kind of are starting to get one, but with the iPhone, Apple follows a very predictable cycle on what we expect to see. One year it's a design change, other years it's features, stuff like that. With the Apple Watch, it's been sort of sporadic, and by all accounts, the Series 5 wasn't a huge deal. Despite the always-on display for many people. But I think with the Apple Watch, what's so tough about it is this more than ever is probably not an accessory or a piece of Apple hardware that people buy year after year. The iPhone, many of us, ourselves included, will justify the upgrade from the 12 to the 13 and year-over-year differences. But with the Apple Watch, I have been, at least personally, a lot less tempted to upgrade every year. It's like I have the 5. I don't really need the 6. It had some new stuff in there, but it really just wasn't enough to get me to upgrade. And I just kind of don't know what's going to be the case with the Series 8. If I go with the 7, will I get the 8? I guess it really kind of depends on what Apple adds to it. But have you kind of felt the need year over year to make the upgrades, even though some years have definitely been better than others? But by all accounts, usually you could probably hang on to an Apple Watch for a generation or 2 or 3 and then make the move. I guess, well, case in point, you have the 4. So obviously there was nothing with the 5 or 6 that made you want to upgrade. Why didn't you upgrade to the 6, especially, a year after the 5? Why did you wait this long for the 7?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I look at tech a little differently than I think maybe some people, is where I'm looking at it like, what can this thing do for me? So like the new iPhone, for instance, I have the iPhone 13 Pro here, which we talked about last week. If you didn't hear that episode, go check it out. But this, for all intents and purposes, is the same phone as the iPhone 12 Pro Max or 12 Pro. But as I started to use it and as I started to experience it, the camera improvements that I saw were meaningful to me. And I take tons of pictures with my phone. It matters to me that the camera's better. And the screen is great. And I love having a good screen. Like, those are meaningful changes. The Apple Watch, on the other hand, the sensors on the Series 4 are plenty for me. I'm not someone who needs to check my blood oxygen level at any noticeable rate. I have the ECG. I have all the exercise features. That's all basically the same as it is on the Series 6. Even the Series 7, the sensors didn't really change. I also have LTE, so that is something I'm not going to get an update to. I'm trying to think I don't need the always-on display because since the always-on display was so late to the game with the Apple Watch, I have the muscle memory of just flicking my wrist and the screen's always on. I've never had that issue. Now, sure, once I'm used to the always-on display, will it have been better at the end? Probably, but it's not something that I'm like clamoring for. I don't need it. And when I tried the Series 5 and the Series 6, that's kind of why I didn't keep them, because I didn't do anything differently with the watch. Like, it just still sat on my wrist. I still did the exercise tracking. I still occasionally used LTE for the times when I was, not with my phone, which actually for me has happened quite a few times, and that's why I still have the LTE model. One little anecdote for that. When I went to go pick up my 13 Pro, I totally forgot to bring this is like the biggest first world problem as I say it. I totally forgot to bring my Tesla key because it's a phone key. But because I'm on the upgrade program, I had to give them my old phone.
Yep.
So I didn't have a key to my car. So luckily, my Apple Watch with LTE came in clutch. I just activated the car with a third-party app on my watch, got in the car, worked perfectly fine. So those are those situations where I really like having LTE. It doesn't happen every single day, but it's something that I've appreciated, and I've used it enough to justify it. But all that stuff is on the Series 4. I have the Series 4. The Series 7, there honestly is not a good reason why I should be upgrading, because again, like the same things apply there, but that is more where it comes in for me, where I just love tech and I want to try it and I want something new. It's not because I think it's actually going to be substantially different experience or anything.
I will say, always on display, at least for me, total game changer. Now I can't go back. I got my dad he had a Series 0. We got him a Series 6 for Father's Day. That's loves,
a big upgrade.
Yeah, huge. He loves the always-on display. And that has been my favorite thing for me on the 5.
Yeah, so when I tried the 5 and the 6, I didn't notice it enough. That's why I didn't really bother me that I didn't have it. But I am interested to see with the Series 7, the always on display is now brighter. That was one of my complaints, is that I couldn't actually see the screen because it was a little too dim, especially like outdoors. That's supposed to be brighter now, so I'm actually interested to see how much of a difference that is.
I will say that Apple software is definitely a little janky this year with iOS 15, and then watchOS 8 specifically, I'm noticing a really weird issue with the LTPO on the Series 5, where that in the past, I can basically just kind of raise my wrist just a little bit, and then I could see the time, whatever the current time is. I've never seen the screen sort of refresh from its low power state to the on stage. With watchOS 8, I see it all the time. More often than not, I can raise my wrist and wait like a full kind of 1 Mississippi before the display refreshes and shows me the updated
that's
time.
Interesting.
That's weird.
That that negates the
like
point of the always on display.
It definitely seems like more of a software thing than a hardware thing, because I never had
because
before watchOS 8.
But
I will say, to your point about sort of loving tech, there are very few pieces of tech that I will justify a year-over-year purchase, or at least a more often than not upgrade. My computer, not so much. When there are big improvements, sure, but usually I don't upgrade computers until it's like every couple of years. But for me, the pieces of tech that I use basically every day that are worth it, like if they broke, I'd go out and get a new one tomorrow. It's the iPhone, it's the Apple Watch. As I turn on the flashlight again, man, I have a bad habit of doing that. It's AirPods Pro. Those are like the three for me that I use every single day. If I lost my AirPods Pro, I'd go buy a new pair tomorrow. If I cracked my Apple Watch, I'd get a new one. Those are just the three pieces of tech that I use so much every single day, that I rely on every day, that the price does not become irrelevant by any means, but it is much easier to justify those purchases because you use it every single day for X amount of minutes. I've just gotten so used to them that they've become such an important part of sort of my tech ecosystem. So that's why, for me, I'm more willing to upgrade to the Series 7. I really do want a little bit of a larger display. Like you said, the display should be brighter as well. So I'm looking forward to the Series 7. The one weird thing about this year's Apple Watch, besides the delayed launch, is that by the time this episode is out, pre-orders have obviously gone live.
We're not going to make that mistake again. Like we did with the iPhone.
We did. We're not going to give tips here. But what's weird that I've noticed here, as we're recording this, there's no pricing on the Series 7, or I guess specifically, there's no configurator. You can't actually go on and configure your finish and the bands and the screen size like you usually can. You can't even explore like pricing. All we know is like sort of the starting price of it. We're assuming that pricing is going to be the same as the Series 6, but there is no way to go on here and favorite it or pre-order or anything like that. With the iPhone, they made it super easy to sort of jump through and like get exactly the model and the finish and the capacity and the color you wanted, so you were good to go. With the Series 7, it's going to kind of be the Wild West. You just have to go on there and it's like the fastest fingers win, because there is no advantage to anybody this year on getting that secured before pre-orders go live.
Yeah, and that's weird because of all products that you need to customize, the Apple Watch is the one. Like, you have the different materials, you have LTE versus Wi-Fi, you have the different bands, you want to ball out, you got Hermes. Like, there's so many different options. Or I totally forgot, even Nike. Like, there's so many options for the Apple Watch. And yeah, I was looking through a few days ago, like, just interested to see what options they had. Like, I was like, ooh, I really like the green aluminum model. Like, what would that look like with these different bands? And you can't do any of that. That's so weird. Yeah. I don't know what the reason for that is. Like, are they going to update it before Friday so that you can favorite them? Or is it just going to be a free-for-all? What's
weird, too, is, and we've complained about this in the past, the Apple Watch ordering experience is by far the worst thing I've ever experienced on the Apple website. It is been nothing but a problem. I wish they would just make it like the iPhone, where you could just kind of configure, okay, this is the screen size I want, this is the finish I want, this is the color I want, and then just kind of go through it that way. With the Apple Watch, you have to like go through this really weird page of bands and colors, and it's just, I don't know, to me it's very confusing, and that's what I worry about when pre-orders go live. It's a very cumbersome experience. I wish they would just streamline this more. I don't know why they don't. I'm sure there's a reason why. I guess it's sort of almost a different crowd than the iPhone. It's more of an accessory, so people want to sort of mix and match. But I don't get it.
It's just for pre-orders that it really is annoying. Like, actually, I think their configurator thing for the mix and match, the bands and stuff, that's actually fine. It's just when it's the day of and you're trying to get in there real quick, that's when it's a problem. I wish maybe they do this, but I don't think they do. I wish they would let you just buy the watch itself. I have so many bands. Like I don't need a new band. It would be kind of cool to just like give me the watch, shave off like $30 because that's how much the bands are, like, and just ship me the watch. I'd be perfectly happy with that.
Yeah, it would be nice if there was an option for that. Just like, I don't need a band, just give me the watch. I don't know. The Apple Watch, lots of mystery surrounding why Apple chooses things they do with the Apple Watch, and the ordering process is one of them. So we will see. I mean, they will go on sale this coming Friday when this is live. So what date is that? Let me do
I believe it's the 8th.
Some real time look. Well, so pre-orders the 8th, and then they go in store the 15th.
Then the 15th, yeah.
So we will have some impressions on the Series 7 in the following week. Looking forward to testing that bigger screen size.
I'm going to be getting one either way. You're going to be getting one either way to test. So we'll know in a few weeks if we're going to be actually keeping them.
We can compare notes on the aluminum and stainless steel and see which one is the way to go.
Exactly.
But that was kind of one of the biggest stories in the Apple world this week as we sort of sit in limbo between a major product launch with the iPhone 13 and the iPad mini, and then sort of waiting for the next event. This is where we are trapped in this sort of just waiting for the ball to drop, waiting for something to happen. And there wasn't a big amount of news this week. Probably the biggest story was sort of the 10th anniversary of Steve Jobs' passing. Sort of many Apple executives and celebrities and critics alike all sort of reflecting on sort of the last 10 years without Steve Jobs, his sort of everlasting legacy at Apple and certainly the tech world. We can kind of get into Apple sort of in the last 10 years and stuff they've launched, but do you remember, Matt, where you were when you heard the news? I know that's sort of one of the big parts of sort of tech history was sort of that event. Do you remember that day and what happened? Because I certainly remember on my perspective sort of what that day sort of entailed.
Yeah, I mean, it was nothing too notable. I was just at home, and I think that was, I'm trying to decide. So that's 2010, right? Or was that 2011?
It was 2011.
2011, yeah. So I was only like 4 years into my tech career, if you could say it that way. Like 4 years before that, I could not care about tech less. Like that was not even an interest to me. And it was because of the MacBook Pro, which was running Tiger, the 2006 MacBook Pro. One of my friends had one. So I was in the laptop program back in the day. This was before everyone had computers, and I mean everyone had computers, but this is before they were ubiquitous and like every single person had a computer. So at school we had the laptop program, which is a few classes you actually worked on a laptop instead of like notebooks and stuff like that. And my friend had a MacBook Pro, and he was the only one in the school that had one because the school had a deal with Microsoft that we had to use Windows computers. But for whatever reason, he just went against it and nothing happened. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, ooh, this is awesome. And I did the same thing. But that being said, that's when it started that I actually cared about this stuff. I followed it really heavily, and I was on that same MacBook, my very first MacBook that I got when I loaded that Apple website, and I saw the message that he had passed. I think I still have that saved in like Evernote or something. I took a screenshot of it. Nothing crazy, but what about you?
I remember when that happened, I think I was like home from school. It was like the afternoon. And I remember watching Leo Laporte's podcast network, Twit. He had like live breaking news coverage, and they brought on a lot of people and they shared a lot of stories. I remember sort of sharing in that experience with others in the tech space, which I thought was super cool, kind of even if it was just watching that live stream. That was really cool to sort of experience. And now 10 years later, it is crazy to see how much has changed in the world, in the tech world, with Apple, but also just how much Steve Jobs, I guess, credit to him in many ways, but he was a visionary in a lot of respects, but also just to see how the products that he helped to create and help to establish still dominate the tech space. The iPhone, obviously, the iPad, the personal computer with the Mac and the various models, all of those today are still thriving and sort of better than ever. and I tried to sort of do a list of different products that were released sort of in the past 10 years without Steve Jobs. And the list was harder to come up with than I thought. And we can kind of go through those in a second. But I guess before that, Matt, what are your kind of initial thoughts now 10 years later on Tim Cook? There was a lot of debate. I remember very clearly in 2012, 2013, Apple was not innovating. Tim Cook was the wrong guy for the job. Obviously, hindsight is 2020, but sort of looking back now, how do you think Tim Cook has done sort of trying to not even fill the shoes of Steve Jobs, but to really be his successor at the helm of Apple?
Yeah, there's two ways to look at it. You can look at it as how is Apple doing as a business, and then how is Apple doing as what I think a lot of fans and a lot of people in the tech space have thought of as Apple as a philosophy, like what their goal is. And as a company, you can't deny that Tim Cook has just hit it out of the park. They're making boatloads of money, and it's not slowing down, even with all the crazy pandemic stuff. It's still going. There are many new products, many of which are extremely successful. So from that perspective, you can't say Tim Cook has done a bad job. From the kind of ethos and idea of what Apple is to its fans, that I think has changed quite a bit. I think the biggest change that we've seen, though, is that Apple went from this really kind of niche company to, which obviously at the time when they came out with the iPhone and the iPhone started to get popular, obviously it was millions and millions of people using these products. But just in kind of the thinking of it, Windows was the dominant, Microsoft was the big player in the game. If you had an Apple computer especially, you were kind of going against the crowd. At least that was the idea, even if it wasn't necessarily true. That has definitely changed. Apple is as mainstream as it can ever be. There's still that want for Apple products. People still, make fun of people with green bubbles and stuff like that. As wrong or right as that is, it is still something that happens. So the company has definitely changed. I don't think it's necessarily for the better or for the worse. Apple as a company is doing perfectly well, but yeah, a lot has changed. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to try to track what Apple is going to do next. And it's sort of hard to understand as well the scope of what this means, especially the last couple of years, because, even though Steve Jobs wasn't there, Johnny Ive was still heavily involved. And obviously he has since moved on to his own independent design firm. And it's hard to know sort of how or how pre-involved he was with future products and how involved he currently is. So it's sort of hard to know how much of this was still influenced by Steve Jobs or Steve Jobs type personalities at Apple. But like you said, Tim Cook has obviously helped Apple to become a financial success by basically all accounts, and Apple is still doing better than ever today. But let me ask you about some of your thoughts on some products that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve Jobs might have been involved in one way or another, but these were, by and large, launched in the past 10 years under Tim Cook's leadership. Let's see if these were successes or if they were failures. First things first, probably as I make a mess here on my desk, one of the biggest products to launch under Tim Cook was arguably the Apple Watch. That was sort of his first big product. Since it's been, that launched in 2014, 2015, right? So now about 6 years later.
One of those.
How do you think that has stood the test of time? No pun intended.
So I was looking at this list that you put together, and I'm trying to think of anything else that you missed, and I can't really think of anything. I think this is pretty much it. But the Apple Watch is the only thing on the... Well, no. The Apple Watch is one of two products on this list that is actually new. Everything else is an iteration of some sort. So
right.
For being a completely new product... And relatively early on, that was only 4 years after Steve had left the company and passed. And, there's questions, what was in development, what wasn't in development. But I think it's generally the consensus that Steve Jobs had nothing to do with the Apple Watch. He was not involved. I believe that happened after. Because, for instance, we have the iPad mini on this list. And I think it has come out since then that Steve Jobs knew about the iPad mini. He hated the idea of the iPad mini, but he knew he had to make one. So those kind of things. Steve Jobs was involved in many products that came out way later. But I believe the Apple Watch was not one of them. So in that sense, first, Apple, or Tim Cook, I guess you could say, but really Apple saved themselves on the Apple Watch, because when it first came out, it was a cool product, but there was a lot of issues. We've talked about this many times, but it was slow. There was way too many features for the slowness of the product. You couldn't do much on it. You physically couldn't do much on it because of how slow it was. They had the whole debacle of the $10,000 gold watch. There was just so many. It didn't have an identity as a product, but they have really fixed that since then. It's now the notification, fitness, and health machine, and that is exactly what the Apple Watch is. It is, I wouldn't say it's a status symbol, but everyone has one. You walk around, you're not going to, no matter where you go, you're going to see Apple Watches. Like, it has become a successful product. So in that sense, they have done a great job with that. But as I'm looking at the other products here, they all are kind of like in line with what was already existing. It's just like iterations on. So let's just go through this list real quick. Yep. iPad Pro and iPad Mini. Like I said, the iPad Mini was, Steve Jobs already knew about that, but that was something that came out. iPad Pro, I mean, you could argue that this is just a powerful tablet. It would have happened either way, no matter if Steve Jobs was there or not. But the iPad existed. Apple Silicon Macs, same idea. Apple started doing silicon with the original iPad, the A4 chip, and Steve Jobs was obviously involved with that because he announced that product. So I don't see why that wouldn't have continued exactly the same way it has now. Apple Card, Apple TV Plus, Apple Fitness Plus, News Plus, Arcade, all this stuff. These are iterations on iCloud and services. Now, whether or not some of these would have existed, I'm not entirely sure, but it's not completely new. Like, it's not. The only one I think wouldn't have existed for sure is Apple Card. I don't think Steve Jobs would have done Apple Card.
Well, I'll give Tim Cook credit in that iCloud was around since Steve Jobs. Mobile Me was sort of the predecessor in .Mac and all that stuff. But I do have to give,
that goes way back.
I'll give Tim Cook credit because obviously Steve Jobs didn't know what the future held, but I don't think that Apple at that time knew what services and streaming and subscriptions was going to be like. And I do think Tim Cook does deserve some credit for sort of pushing Apple into the services industry. He saw what AWS and Google's, cloud offerings, like he saw what the services industry has become. And whether or not I love some of these things, like Apple Card seems like a really weird, that's like one of the weirdest products I think Apple has sort of entered product categories in the last couple of years. And I don't really personally use News Plus or Arcade or stuff like that. TV Plus, I think that was a very interesting. That's got to be a Tim Cook decision, and whether or not it's successful yet is still sort of up in the air. But definitely, Tim Cook has sort of pushed Apple into the services industry, which I definitely think is the future of computing and of technology. So that was a good thing. So I guess we're gonna have to see how successful that is, but it's doing better and better year after year.
Oh, definitely,
but I agree with you. A lot of these iterations were. Or a lot of these products, rather, were iterations of existing products. Obviously, the iPhone has changed and evolved, but the iPhone was around. The Apple Watch was really the only true new product. And even, like I'm looking at this list again, Apple Watch, iPad Pro, even the iPad Mini, those are all sort of designed by Johnny Ive, or at least heavily influenced by Johnny Ive. So I mean, I guess there's, obviously a good leader has to delegate, and Steve Jobs wasn't designing the product, so to speak, but he was sort of running the ship, and Tim Cook has done a great job running the ship, and Apple has continued to iterate on products, but obviously there's this question of, if Steve Jobs was still alive and he was still running Apple, what would the company be like today, and would they be, we saw how far ahead they were with the iPhone and the iPad. Would they be even further ahead with these new products developed under Steve Jobs? I guess I want to get your take on that. But also the last product here on this list, which probably again was a Tim Cook decision, which obviously was a very successful decision, probably designed by Johnny Ive, but still a Tim Cook decision, was AirPods. The entire wireless earbud space, even AirPods Max now with wireless headphones. The one thing I forgot to include on this list that also was there was HomePod. That was probably under Tim Cook.
That's how you know how
who knows
successful
that
that product
really
is.
not a huge success.
I totally
on that
forgot
front.
about that too.
And obviously, Steve Jobs has had his problems too. Like, not everything he touched turned to gold and was successful, but you definitely see a pattern of hit or misses under Tim Cook in the last 10 years, as every company is going to have. But let's talk AirPods specifically. That was a very bold decision to remove the headphone jack. Obviously, we knew that Steve Jobs wanted this portless iPhone. Kind of that was the end game there. But AirPods was certainly a very bold decision that obviously was a cultural phenomenon. What do you think about sort of AirPods and Tim Cook's direction on that project?
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that this was another iteration because Apple has made headphones in the past. They had, I forgot what they were called, but they've always shipped headphones with the iPhone and the iPod before that. They are obviously a huge company when it comes to music, so they had their versions of headphones. And when the first AirPods came out, they looked exactly like the EarPods, which were shipping with phones at the time. They just happened to be wireless. So you could argue that's an iteration, but still, the decision to actually do it and do it relatively early, or at least in the way that they did, I think really paid off. Because yes, there were plenty of Bluetooth headphones before that. I had tons of them. But they were really the first usable for the mainstream Bluetooth headphones where you take them out of the thing, you put them in like regular headphones, and they just work. And even to this day, I still think AirPods do that the best out of any product. Since then, you could... Like I said, there was many Bluetooth headphones before the AirPods, but you could argue that AirPods really pushed everyone else to get into that space and do it in a very similar way. For instance, Google makes the Pixel Buds. They do the same thing. You open them, put them in, they just connect. Samsung has their Galaxy Buds. They do the same thing. Every company has versions of them at this point, but you could argue Apple really made that push. And it's because they did it so early, and they did it in the way that they did, where they removed the headphone jack from the iPhone 7 and said, this is what we're giving you instead. Well, not giving you, you have to buy it, but this is what you're getting instead. Although when they did that, then they weren't available for like months and months. But the fact that they did it in that way, I think almost forced people to try them because they're like, well, I don't have a headphone jack. I'll give it a shot because this is something new, something cool. And it obviously worked. I mean, I love my AirPods. I got my AirPods Pro in right now. I've got my AirPods Max over there. I had the original AirPods. My wife she has AirPods Pro now. She loves them. My parents have them. My sister, like everyone I know has AirPods. It became a status symbol for quite a long time. Although I think now it's just kind of ubiquitous. Like no one really cares they have AirPods. Actually, I saw a funny thing. It was from like fashion TikTok or whatever. And they were saying that wired headphones are coming back in because now it's cool to have the wires. I don't really believe that much, but they're everywhere now, and you can certainly trace that back to AirPods.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I kind of jumped on the bandwagon late because they were so hard to find for a while. And
That's
then
true,
I was like many people who kind of jumped on the bandwagon of buying them from AT&T, and like you could get them from there and you got them faster. And I love AirPods. Suffice it to say, they are fantastic. The other thing I will say that Tim Cook should get some credit for with his leadership specifically is helping Apple double down in privacy and safety and security. Obviously, that was always very important. Steve Jobs famously talked about asking users explicitly what data to collect, and he was very privacy focused as well. Apple has been for, as long as I can remember, but Tim Cook has really steered the ship to double down on that with a bunch of software additions and hardware additions to keep your data on your phone safe and secure, not without its qualms or without its issues in recent months, but definitely that was another Tim Cook decision. And he has definitely made a lot of leadership decisions that maybe weren't the most flashy, but definitely cemented Apple's reputation. And I think that Tim Cook should get credit for definitely he did not tarnish the Apple name. He did not tarnish the Apple reputation. He has kept the brand as elevated and as, I don't know what the word is, as illustrious as ever and has even risen. And Apple is still known and revered as a powerful company that makes great products. They're beautiful. They work seamlessly. And he has sort of continued that legacy at Apple. And as we sort of discussed a few weeks ago about who will continue that, that's a big burden to carry. That's a really not only a big reputation in terms of sort of name value, but you've got a worth of, over $1 trillion with all these, people counting on you. I cannot imagine the pressure. And obviously it's easy for us to sort of, play armchair quarterback and say what he should or should not have done or what he should do in the future. But I think that obviously Apple is still thriving under Tim Cook's leadership. And definitely it has been a lot more of iterations and upgrades to existing products and not so much new products. Obviously, there are rumors about new products like an Apple Car or this Apple VR headset. But do you think that Tim should have introduced totally new products under his leadership, or do you think that these iterations are not giving him enough credit, that these are still substantial improvements and that he should get credit for what Apple has done, even if they've been, by and large, very iterative?
Oh, yeah. Just because they're iterations doesn't mean that they aren't great products that have elevated, like you said, the brand. Because the iPad Pro has completely changed how people think of the iPad. The Apple Silicon Macs have really taken the Mac and brought it into the forefront of computing. Like, everyone is kind of admitting, like, Apple's really killing it with these. Same with their, well, maybe not their services, actually. Their services are yet to be seen.
They're trying.
But, yeah, and especially AirPods. So, obviously, they deserve a ton of credit. He and the company deserve a ton of credit because of what they have done. I would say it would be nice to see new products, but I honestly don't know what those products would be. That's always the thing I come back to. Like, sure, we're looking to Apple to make those products and introduce them to us, but even still, like, okay, I totally see the AR/VR headset thing, but that tech isn't ready. So I'm not surprised they didn't release that yet. Mm-hmm. Once they do, and if the tech is ready at that point, then, like, I totally see the reason for that to exist, and that would be very cool. But for them to have released that like 2 years ago, or when Google Glass came out, for instance, even though I think Steve Jobs was still alive when Google Glass came out, maybe not. But, you know, if they did it back then obviously it wouldn't be ready, and it wouldn't have probably revolutionized the world like it possibly could once the tech is ready. Same with Apple Car. Like, are they going to beat Tesla to market? I highly doubt it. Like, that, those are the two products that we know they are at least working on. But I can't think of anything else that either A, I would want, or B, that they could have done that would have worked out because the tech either was ready or wasn't ready.
Yeah, I will say that also, although these have been very iterative, Tim Cook has done a great job of really trying to push Apple into spaces that he thinks are going to be important in the long term. Obviously, pivoting iTunes from one-click purchases to a streaming model with Apple Music, sort of, again, moving into these services and kind of software as a service thing, kind of building up iCloud to be sort of an all-in-one catch-all for photos sharing and storage and document sharing and backups and stuff like that. He's really sort of pushed Apple into a great position for their future and has sort of brought a lot of these technologies in-house with Apple Silicon and different parts of like the rumors of the Apple cell modem, really trying to build all this stuff in-house so the future of Apple products can be better than ever. Apple owns more and more of the hardware stack, and then they can now better optimize those products to be kind of how they want it. They don't have to rely on Intel to release a chip to enable them to do something they want to do on their Macs or to have better battery life. The more they own, the more they can do and the more they can sort of push the limits. And Tim Cook has done a great job not only allowing that to happen sort of on a design level and on a business end, but also managing the business in a way that that can happen, moving money around, making money that Apple can afford to make these big investments. And again, they've paid off. If you look at Apple stock, certainly the company is doing better than ever, and Tim Cook's got to get some credit for that. It might not be the most flashy CEO in the game, might not have made sort of the boldest moves like Steve Jobs, but if you look at the list of iterative updates, they're nothing new, but they've been better and better and better, and we definitely have, great products these days thanks to sort of Tim Cook's leadership.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that credit goes even further because Apple and Tim Cook, under his leadership, has had plenty of opportunities to go the other directions. There's no reason why they couldn't have started collecting our data and going the Google route and really, I mean, theoretically the products would be better for it, but there's no reason they couldn't have done that or shouldn't have done that. But they didn't. They chose not to. Also, dang it, I totally had a different point, but I forgot. Going along with that, though, that was what I was going to say. For the product side, not just privacy, but for the product side, they could have easily gone the Samsung route. Let's throw every feature, let's experiment in public, and let's see what works, what doesn't work. And if the products aren't as good, who cares? At least, we're making quote unquote cool products that maybe people want, maybe people don't. That's Samsung's route, and it actually has worked pretty well for them. Like, people love Samsung phones. They love that it has all the latest crazy tech. You get the folding phone years earlier than many other companies are doing it. But Apple chose not to do that. And you know, you would think like, oh, well, it's Apple. Of course, they're not going to do that. But that's not the case. They went that route when Steve Jobs left in the 80s. He left in the 80s, right? Yeah. So, you know, they went that route. They started making really junk products, and they iterated too many times. They started making like cameras and like all kinds of weird stuff. And the products were bad, and the company nearly went bankrupt. It's a story old as time in the tech space. So I think they definitely Tim Cook definitely did a great job of keeping that Steve Jobs mentality while still trying to make the company progress and be as successful as possible. When we talked about this a few episodes back when we were talking about Tim Cook possibly leaving, but when he was first promoted, it was kind of like a weird, like no one had really heard of Tim Cook. He wasn't really front and center. And when he first started giving presentations, it was a little like meh. He not the most he didn't have the most stage presence and everything. But I think it is the best decision Steve could have made to appoint him as the CEO, because like we said back in the other episode too, there was rumors that maybe Johnny Ive should have been the CEO. I think that would have been a disaster. There are probably other executives who would have been great, but appointing Tim Cook definitely paid off.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, right? I mean, I would not want the pressure of being the CEO. I mean,
imagine.
what an enormous... I mean, not only to run that company, but to have to follow up Steve Jobs. You're never going to live up to the expectations. There always is going to be the lingering question of, well, what if Steve was alive? What if
even
he
to
did
this
this
day?
and that?
Yeah,
and that's why, I mean, Steve Jobs famously said, or that was Steve Jobs that kind of told Tim Cook, like, don't try to be like me. Don't try to think what would Steve do. Don't try to make that mistake. I think it was Disney that did the same thing. Like, where was that Disney? What would Walt Disney do?
Or Walt Disney, yeah. I think that was what it was.
Whatever it was, like, whatever company it was. I'm sorry if I'm butchering this quote or whatever the story was. But basically, the essence was, don't try to think what would Steve do. Just try to do what's best. Do kind of what you think is right. And I think Tim Cook has done a great job of balancing sort of the magic and the aura of Apple that Steve has created with the business side and trying to progress. I mean, by all accounts, hats off to Tim Cook. He's done a fantastic job. And as we sort of look at the last stretch of Tim Cook's tenure at Apple as it kind of comes to a close, presumably in the next few years, obviously one of the biggest achievements he will have under his belt is Apple's move to Apple Silicon. This transition from a behemoth company like Intel over to their own custom silicon. A lot of people would say that that would be a crazy move, that could never be done. If you would have told Steve Jobs that, hey, those chips we have in the iPhone and the iPad and the iPod, we're going to eventually move the Macs to those. It sounded probably like a dream, but wouldn't have become reality. But now under Tim Cook, that has happened. And now we're sort of getting ready for the next iteration of these M chips with this November event. And we're supposed to get the M1X chip. And as we sort of look at what we can see at this November event, a lot of the questions I've seen, and I think we got this question from a viewer as well, someone was asking about for the M1X or M2s, what are they going to add? And to that point, Matt, I want to ask you, there's a lot of confusion about M1X versus M2. Can you kind of explain what the difference is between those two chips and what the meaning of an M1X is? Kind of what's the naming scheme here with Apple's silicon processors, and why is it important?
Well, I was going to ask you the same question because I'm not exactly sure. But here, let me give my general thought and then correct me if I'm totally wrong.
Sure.
So basically, the way I've understood it at least is that the M1X, or that X name, is similar to what they did with like the iPad. You have the A12 and then you get the A12Z. So it's like an iteration on that chip. It's for the it's a more powerful processor, but it's not a completely new design. Whereas the M2 is a new processor and it has a new family of names. Am I right there? Am I right there? Or am I totally wrong?
I think that's the consensus I've heard. And obviously we don't know yet until these laptops actually come out. But what I've heard, the theory is that the M1, M2, M3, those are the more consumer chips, while, like you said, with the A12Z, the M1X and the M2X and those iterations are more the sort of finer tuned pro end, higher performance end chips. So if you're looking to get a Mac, M1, M2, not a bad way to go, but the M1X, those are sort of the supercharged chips made for the pros. So that's why the new MacBook Pros, the 14-inch and 16-inch models, are expected to have the M1X chip inside, and also this rumored Mac Mini would have the M1X chip as well. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about, man, these MacBook Pros have been rumored forever, and they're finally supposed to drop at a rumored October or November event. What is the big deal with these MacBook Pros, and why are they being regarded as possibly being sort of the perfect laptop, the best MacBook Pro ever?
Yeah, so the basic consensus here is that not only is it finally going to have the M1, well, I guess we have a MacBook Pro with the M1 chip now, but it's going to have the updated, more powerful M1X chip, and we're going to have it in both sizes, the new 14-inch model, which has been rumored for years. We're going to finally get that, but it's also kind of fixing a lot of the issues that a lot of people had, mainly the port situation. Apple was very early with the 2016 MacBook Pro to kill all the ports and only go USB Type-C. And I'd say for the most part it has worked fine, but there are always those, it's even to this day, it's dongle city. Like, you're going to need a dongle at some point. It works like most of the time, like 80% of the time you're fine, until that one time when you need the dongle. You need Ethernet or you need an SD card reader, and you just can't do it without a dongle. Well, that is supposed to be being fixed. So the basic idea is that we're going to get some ports back, mainly HDMI and an SD card reader. Now, personally, HDMI is not something I'm all that interested in. I can see the uses for it, but it's not something I was clamoring for. But as people who make videos for a living, having an SD card reader back in the MacBook Pro is going to be something huge. And then also we're supposed to have mini LED displays, which are what we have in the new 12.9-inch iPad Pro, and that I'm using one right now to kind of watch this stream as we're doing it, and the screen on this thing is amazing. So getting that on a bigger 14-inch and 16-inch size, all for it. And then all the M1 goodness, like the battery life, the processing speed, all that is supposed to be coming. And really what I think the best way to kind of frame this is that this is the first generation of computers with Apple Silicon that is, well, let me rephrase that. This is the first generation of Apple computers with Apple Silicon, because before they just threw the chip into what they had already to kind of give it a test, see if it works. This is the first real computer designed with M1 in mind, at least in my opinion.
Right, and that is going to be very exciting to see. I mean, we've heard rumors about redesigned MacBook Pros for years. I remember the day that the 16-inch MacBook Pro was released, and I think that was like a press release update, and it was just on the site. And we had heard these rumors about a 14-inch and 16-inch, and we thought it was going to be majorly redesigned. And then we were all sort of disappointed when it just got a little bit of a bigger screen and like tiny little bits shaved off the bezel, and that was it. These have been sort of in the works for years, and now we're finally going to see it. Like you said, the mini LED display should be nice. Obviously, the ports are back. The one thing I've heard that was going to happen and now might not happen, but probably still will, is the removal of the touch bar. This was another thing that Apple sort of tried and sort of failed to sort of get everyone to catch on to. I'll never forget sort of the demo of someone with, it was like one of those DJ applications, DJing on the touch bar. I know you're a fan of the touch bar. I hate the touch bar, and I could not be happier to see it go. Do you think that Apple is going to quietly kill the touch bar and just remove it on these new MacBook Pros, and that's sort of just an experiment gone wrong and just something we are going to sort of remember fondly and not see anymore in future Apple laptops?
Yeah, I think they're going to take it away, just because there's no need for the touch bar. Like, I wouldn't say I love the touch bar. I'm perfectly okay with it. I like using it when I do, but for instance, I have the MacBook Pro 16-inch right here behind my iPad, folded up. It's attached to my main screen, which is right here, and I'm using like a normal keyboard. I've never once missed not having the touch bar, like from having it in the laptop mode going to the desktop mode. I've never missed the touch bar, so I'm perfectly fine with it going away. Plus, on the 16-inch model, they brought back the escape key because everyone was furious about the escape key not being there. So it's like, they kind of know. They know people don't want this.
Yeah.
Or even if people did want it, it's like no one's asking for it. So it's like there's no harm, no foul. Make the computers a little less complicated, make them a little cheaper, and take it away and just bring us a regular keyboard. I think everyone will be perfectly happy with that. There is no rumors of this because I don't think it's happening, but Face ID.
I wish.
And that's not happening, but I wish it would happen. I don't understand why not.
I don't understand either. I've heard like the enclosure is going to be too big and it add thickness to the bezel and all that stuff. I don't really understand why it's not there. The last Face ID rumor I heard was that the next update to the iMac line should get Face ID. And if you think of any product that should have Face ID, it's that, because they can make the bezel as thick as necessary for the Face ID stuff. And that was the last I heard, is that the next update, whenever that would be, would have Face ID. So it's probably still not going to be coming to the MacBook Pros, which is a bummer. And then sort of thinking about this November event or October event, whatever it happens to be, obviously the MacBook Pros are really the star of the show. That's what everybody has been clamoring for forever. But what else could we see? We had discussed before AirPods 3 would probably be included in that event as well. What else do you think that we could see at this next event? Is it just going to be MacBook Pros and AirPods 3? Is it just going to be sort of just the MacBook Pros? What will this event sort of focus on?
I will get to that in 1 second, but I just thought of a rebuttal to my Face ID thinking. So I just got the M1. I just got the M1 iMac for a kind of family computer that we have downstairs, and it's got Touch ID. It's great, and I love the design of the computer, which I didn't love at first, but that's a whole different story. But I was just thinking about it. If it had Face ID, it would actually be more steps to use Face ID than it would to use Touch ID. Because right now, the screen's off because it went to sleep or whatever. I walk up to the computer, I put my finger on the keyboard, it unlocks the computer, one button, one done. If it had Face ID, I would have to hit the keyboard, hit the mouse or something to activate the screen, which would then activate Face ID and then unlock. That's 2 steps. Now,
that is true.
Does that matter? No, not really. But I was just thinking about it. I was like, it actually wouldn't be easier.
Well, don't you think that Apple could build in an algorithm that when it detects your face, as it knows what it is, because it knows you through Face ID scanning, if it detects your face sitting down in front of the computer, it would automatically turn it on, scan your face, and then log you in? Couldn't they make it so they could bypass sort of that sleep state?
Yeah, they definitely could, and especially for an iMac where it's always plugged in, you don't have to worry about battery or anything like that. There's definitely ways to get around it. I was just thinking, in the current implementations that they have right now, it actually wouldn't be easier to have Face ID. They would have to do some kind of software difference to do that. Now, on the MacBooks, that is a different story because you open the lid, it automatically turns on, scans your face. Windows Hello has been doing this on Microsoft laptops for years. So my rebuttal is like half there, but I'm just trying to think of it from Apple's perspective, like why they didn't do it in the iMac. I think it's more so that it's like a pro feature. But whatever, Face ID is not happening. Sad about that. Getting back to your question, though, what we're going to see, I mean, they're doing a full event, right? So it has to be at least so we're going to get, the 14-inch to 16-inch MacBook Pro. I would say, we're going to see the AirPods 3 and the M1X Mac Mini. Just because they have to introduce more than 2 things. Although, now that I think about it, when they introduced the iPhone 12, it was just the iPhone 12 and the HomePod Mini, right? They just talked about 2 things. Sure, the iPhone had like 6 versions. But
No, they did the
Pro
Pro
sure?
too. Yeah, they did. It was 12 Mini, 12 Pro, then HomePod.
No, right. No, I know that. I'm saying like it was iPhone and HomePod. It wasn't like iPhone, HomePod, and iPad.
Right.
So they could, like, if the changes to the MacBooks are big enough, they could just talk about MacBooks and then do like, oh, here, by the way, AirPods 3 or something like that.
I think, to your point, I think it's going to start with AirPods 3, and then it's going to be MacBook Pro, and then M1X Mac Mini, because I think that it makes sense to do, I guess, let's say it this way, 2 product categories. So AirPods and audio, then Macs. And I think that the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pro are obviously what is sort of everybody's waiting for. That's the star of the show. But also, if they have this chip, I think it makes sense to put it into something else. And the next thing sort of in the queue that we had heard is going to get the M1X would be a Pro-focused Mac Mini. Now, we had also heard that this was going to be a redesigned Mac Mini, that it would also have more ports. It would have this M1X chip inside. I don't know if we ever sort of got a concrete timeline as to when this was going to be ready to go. The one thing we had heard recently is that the redesigned MacBook Air, which should have a slightly tweaked M1 chip or an M2 chip, that is probably not going to be ready until next year. So the only thing I can think of is a Mac Mini. And an M1X Mac Mini does make sense. It'd have this new chip. It'd have more ports. This would be sort of surprising to see because we've heard so little about it, though I'd be very happy to see it. And it does sort of make sense as you think about Pro machines. The Mac Pro is not ready. This long-rumored iMac large screen iMac Pro does not seem to be ready either. So am I wrong here, or is Mac Mini sort of the last thing we have sort of remaining to be upgraded with this new chip? I guess we have the M1 Mac Mini now, but we'd have sort of the second-tier M1X Mac Mini.
Yeah, I think that's about all that we can expect. They're not going to do any like updates to iPads or anything like that because they already did that. So that's really all it could be. I guess the only question I would have is, well, actually, no, you know what? Now that I think about it, I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to do the Mac Mini and the MacBooks. Another question though is, what are they going to, there's that long rumored MacBook Air with all the colors.
Right.
Now, I've gone on record saying that I do not think that is a MacBook Air. I think that is a different computer altogether, not the MacBook Air. But whatever, that thing is still rumored. So maybe there's more laptops than we're expecting, or maybe the laptops are different than we're expecting. But also another way to look at it is that they're kind of refreshing what they did in the first tier. So we got the MacBook Air, we got the MacBook, and then the Mac Mini. So they need to refresh those and make those the real, quote unquote, real Apple Silicon Macs. So I can totally see that being what they do.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the MacBook Air is sort of, it would make sense for that to get the M2 chip. So maybe that's sort of ushering in the M2 era. It's so tough because we're sort of in uncharted territory. We've always sort of relied on Intel to release the chip and then Apple to sort of come out with the update. And now Apple sort of controls the timetable and they can do things when they want by most accounts. Once they have things ready, they can do it. So we don't really know what Apple's going to do. So I think MacBook Pros, definitely 99% confident in that. AirPods 3, fairly confident. And then that third product really is a mystery. I would think Mac Mini makes most sense. Maybe it's a refreshed MacBook Air. Maybe it's a sneak peek at the Mac Pro. I don't know what we could see, but that's we're coming up on this event pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. But when do you think we will see that redesigned Mac Pro and hopefully, I hope, an iMac Pro type computer? When do you think we would see that? I'm thinking WWDC next year. I believe that's when they did the last Mac Pro.
Right.
And then I think that's probably, I don't remember when they announced the iMac Pro, the first iMac Pro. But that actually makes sense for that event. It's for people who care about pro things, the developers, that kind of thing. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't that be the end of the 2-year mark when they said the full transition would be?
Exactly. So I've heard multiple stories about this. Some say that, when Apple says 2 years, did they mean 2020 through 2022? But some say that no, Apple, when they said 2 years, they meant 2 years from then in June. So we would wrap up the 2022 transition. Or I guess, am I making sense here? At the end of 2022 is when the last refreshed Apple Silicon computer will be released. I think that the Mac Pro will probably be released at the very end. So I would expect in June of 2022, that's where we're tracking here. Yes, I'm getting all my numbers and facts straight here. So yes, I think that we will see a refreshed Mac Pro sort of not launch, but be previewed at WWDC and then probably launch near the end of the year because Apple's going to use all that they can to wait till the very end of 2022 to release that right before the clock strikes midnight and we get into 2023. So I think that that's going to probably be when we see that Mac Pro. And then by then, everything should be all Apple Silicon, bye-bye Intel, hasta la vista, and sort of we're moving forward on this new refresh cycle with new M1X and M1 chips and M2 chips and M2X. It's going to be a very interesting couple of years for the future of Apple computers.
And yeah, kind of going along with that, I think they will also need, along with the Mac Pro, or maybe they'll do it at this November, October event, whatever, they also need to do that larger iMac because right now you have the M1 iMac, the 24-inch model, and then you still need to buy the 27-inch old iMac if that's what you want. If you want that screen size, it's still the old version. They still sell it, so they need to replace that. And once they do that and the Mac Pro, all the computers are completely changed to Apple Silicon. That transition will be complete. So I thought this would be harder than that. Like I thought Apple would. I was like, no way they're going to do it in 2 years. But actually, they don't have that many. They don't have that many computers. Like it's actually very doable. So I think they'll be able to hit that 2-year mark.
And I guess technically speaking, it was to transition all of their product categories over to Apple Silicon. So they've done the iMac.
Yeah.
They've done. Yeah, they've done the iMac, they've done the MacBook Air, they've sort of done the MacBook Pro, but we expect that these new MacBook Pros to really sort of seal the deal. So that'll be MacBook Pro done, MacBook Air done, Mac Mini done, iMac done, and really, officially speaking, Mac Pro would be the last thing. Technically, I guess this larger iMac would be sort of a bonus that we'd get, and something that Apple didn't technically promise, though I still think that many of us really would love to see it. And we have no idea when this is going to come. I would expect that probably maybe at the next Apple Silicon event, when they release these MacBook Airs, maybe that's when they'd also show off this new sort of larger display iMac. We know it's in the works, and it would make sense to see an M1X iMac. So hopefully we see that sometime next year, because I guess, well, we have to see everything that Apple has in store for us. We have to see by the end of 2022. So I guess if it's going to happen, it's going to happen sometime next year.
Yeah, and I think for these upcoming products, the new event, the last question there is, when are we going to actually see this event? So there was rumors it was going to be on October, although that's looking less and less likely, because if it was going to be next week, they would have sent out the invites this week. The week after that, Google is announcing their Pixel, and Apple typically doesn't like to do events on the same day. They have done it with like OnePlus. I remember back then. Remember OnePlus canceled their event because Apple was having it on the same day. Yeah, so like, but I think Apple was there first, maybe I don't know, maybe not, but and then the week after, I believe, is November already. So I think this is going to be a November event, and hopefully it's earlier November, not during Thanksgiving, because that would be very annoying. But Apple's smarter than that. My guess is the first week of November.
Yeah, the last date I've heard was October 26th as a possible date, and I'm looking right now at like sort of the history of Apple events. I'm seeing September, June, April, November. Okay, so there was a November event in 2020.
Yep.
So that would make sense.
But they also had 3 events that year.
Right. They also had the October event too. So Apple typically either does October. I guess so. We're sort of split. Traditionally, they have mostly stuck to the October timeframe, though there has been that one outlier November event. So basically, who knows? We could see either October or November. I would guess, like you, either it's a late October or early November, probably in the next
I'm going to say either
3 weeks.
I'm going to say either 26th of October or the 2nd of November. Those are my guesses.
That's what I'm guessing, too. So the long wait for the MacBook Pros will finally be over. I think, Matt, that about wraps up what we know as of right now about this event. We've talked Steve Jobs' legacy. We've talked Apple Watch Series 7. Any final thoughts here as we wrap up the big Apple news for the week?
No, I mean, I'm excited for all these new products, but we also want to get everyone who's listening, everyone who's watching, and we want to get your opinions on this. So we have that Apple Circle hotline. You can text it, you can give it a call, whatever you want to do. That's 949-354-3508. Contact that number, and we will read it in the show, just like I think this is the same person who has been replying a few.
Yes.
The number looks the same.
The mysterious, no-named person. Which, if this is you, let us know what your name is so we can give you credit. But yes, thank you for your conversation.
Yeah. Or, we could just read your number out. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that. But point being, if you send in a question, we will talk about it on the show. So be sure to do that. But other than that, yeah, it's just a long wait till the new Apple event. At least we're going to get the Apple Watch next week. So we'll have some stuff to talk about.
Apple is sort of sprinkling little things every couple of weeks for us to talk about and to discuss and check out. So we're excited about that. As always, thank you guys so much for watching or listening to the Apple Circle podcast. We'll see you right back here, same time, same place, next week.